Patch 12.5 is bringing a boatload of buffs and nerfs that will shake up the meta, so I'll run through the patch, then give my prediction and tier list for letting you know how this will all affect the meta. First up is system changes, and they're nerfing Tome of Traits. Now you will get desired emblems less often. Moving on to traits. Bodyguards is getting buffed, now they start with a bigger shield. This doesn't change their armor count, so it makes them overall more of a generic frontline. Enchanters are getting buffed across the board and further buffed at 3 and 4. A nice change as I rarely run 3 or 4 enchanters unless I get augments for them. Enforcers get nerfed. This is a welcome change as it's incredibly easy to fit in this trait into all of different types of comps. Innovators are getting their dragon buffed. Now it's a little stronger, and now your auto attacks will always crit whether you have IE or not. Hexa gets nerfed at all levels except for 8. A nice change as this got nerfed a little too hard on the B patch. Twin Shots get a small buff at 4 and 5, which won't change anything besides maybe Twin Shot Soul being more attractive if you're rerolling something like GP. Moving on to 1 costs, Brand gets a buff across the board, which is nice to see. I don't think I've ran him as an early game carry a single time on the last patch, so I will definitely play him more now. Jarvan's getting nerfed quite hard. Now it will take longer for him to cast the spell the first time, and it also takes him longer to cast again with the attack speed nerf. Nocturne is getting slightly nerfed at 1 star and getting a giant buff at 3 star. His spell also works with AP scaling now, but that probably won't have that big of an effect, if any at all. Twitch gets nerfed at 2 and 3 star but buffed at 1 star. A nice change to see as this comp felt a little too strong at times, but they might have hit it a little too hard for it to remain in the meta. Ezreal gets a small AD nerf. This is mostly a nerf to AD forecast carries, as they all use Ezreal as an item carrier in the early game. Although it is a small change, it's actually an indirect buff to AP comps in the early game. Moving on to 2 costs, Ashe is getting buffed at 1 and 2 star, and also gets her spell to travel 1 hex further. This is a great change as Ashe feels terribly weak until she is 3 star. My only worry is that Ashe reroll is already strong, and this might make it dominant as you have a lot more HP now in the early and mid game. If they gave Ashe 3 star a little nerf as well on top of this, I would be very happy about this change overall. Rek'Sai gets reworked. Now she won't steal resistances anymore. Instead, she will heal a ton if she ults the same target twice. With this large of an identity switch, it's hard to see where she will end up, but this overall makes her more tanky and should make her remain power neutral. Corki and Lulu get buffed across the board, which is nice to see for the Yordle players out there. It's also a large nerf to Yordle opener, as Corki is a great AP item carrier as well. Moving on to 3 costs, Echo gets a mana nerf. This is fine as his spell is still powerful, but it will take a little longer before it goes off now. Gnar gets the range of his spell buffed. Now it can travel farther and will overall deal more damage. Maybe this will be enough for us to see reroll Gnar enter the meta. Lucian gets buffed across the board. This is fine as I've not seen a single Lucian carry at any point in the game so far. Malzahar gets nerfed across the board. This is mostly to hit the 3 star version, but I don't think nerfing the 1 and 2 star version was needed here. Morgana gets buffed at 1 and 2 star and nerfed at 3 star. Much like Ashe, she did not feel like that great of a tank at 1 and 2 star, but felt like a monster when 3 starred. Nice to see the jumps in power not be so drastic. Senna gets nerfed at 2 and 3 star, a nice change to see as Senna rerolls started popping up a little too hard towards the end of the patch. Tryndamere gets nerfed across the board. Now he will deal less damage with a spin, but his auto attacks will still deal an insane amount of damage at 3 star. Moving on to 4 costs, Arya gets a starting mana buff, so now Sojin will be just as good as blue buff on her, which is awesome to see as she will be less item dependent in that case, but blue buff will still be a tiny bit better. Her angle between orbs has also decreased. This means that she will now deal less AoE damage, but in return she will deal more focus damage towards single units. This is a change I like to see as it lets her focus down targets easier at the start of fights. Alistar gets his damage nerfed. This will make him a little weaker, but the damage is not what makes Alistar good, so I don't see this changing anything. Braum gets buffed at 1 and 2 star. Personally, I think he needed the buff, but buffing 4 Syndicate units in the same patch has me a little worried. The last thing we want is a patch where only Syndicates are playable. Draven gets buffed and nerfed. Now his spell will scale more with AD, which makes items like Deathblade a little better on him, although he will deal less damage overall with this change, so it is a nerf. But on the other hand, non-VIP Draven gets a really big buff. Now he gets an additional range and also ignores 25% of the armor. You still want to hit VIP Draven though if he is your main carry, but playing Draven and other comps should feel a lot better now. Overall a fantastic change to see, and it should be really healthy for the game. Sivir gets a large attack speed buff, but she is overall weaker than on the launch patch. Hopefully she will be a viable carry next patch. Vi gets her damage nerfed at 1 and 2 star. She is one of the most flexible units in the game, but with this nerf and Enforcer nerf, she will definitely see less play. Irelia gets a small AD nerf. I'm honestly surprised that Irelia keeps getting nerfed, as I don't see that many people in my lobbies do well with her. Renata gets a small nerf across the board. This is a fine change, although this comp has got hit with multiple nerfs so far, so I will be less optimistic about Bruiser Renata next patch. Jhin 1 star gets a buff, which is nice to see. This comp feels really trash until you have Jhin 2 stars, so overall I really like this change. Moving on to 5 costs, Galio gets a buff. Now he will deal even more damage with his HP scaling. Although the Clapio comp is fun, it's incredibly unhealthy for the game, so I overall don't like this change. Make him more tanky if anything while buffing him. Kai'Sa gets a nice attack speed buff. She is now back at where she was during the Christmas patch, although her spell damage is still lower now. Overall a nice change to see, as Kai'Sa has not felt like a proper 5 cost carry last patch. Tahm Kench gets a buff. Now he deals more damage to CC immune targets, which is nice to see. Jinx gets a small buff. Now she becomes more tanky, which is also nice to see. And Sarah gets her AD buffed. Since she deals mostly AP, I don't see this changing anything in terms of her itemization, but it will make her a little stronger. Moving on to items, Bramble gets a nerf late game, but a buff in the early game. Now it won't block 100% of crit damage. This is huge for assassin comps, as this item used to hard counter them. It will still be an incredibly strong item to build against assassins, but they will actually be able to play the game versus you now. The damage buffs is nice to see, as Bramble Vest will become a lot stronger now in the early game, and actually be a good slammable item. Edge of Night gets a small buff. Now it will proc earlier. This is mostly a buff towards damage that would instantly put you into the lower HP threshold, so overall it will not change much. Static Shiv gets a damage nerf. This item is still mostly used to shred MR, so besides that it won't change anything besides being less slammable in the early game. Moving on to augments, there are a ton of augment changes. You can pause if you want to read through all of them, but in general, combat augments are getting nerfed, which means augments that make your unit deal more damage are going to be weaker next patch. That's overall a change I like to see, as combat augments have felt a little too strong, so I like the direction we're moving in. Additionally, some augments won't show up in scenarios where they are useless, such as Knife's Edge when you're running Arcanists. In terms of double up, team chat has been added, so now you can talk to your teammate when typing, and you have to use the alt chat to type to everyone, just like in Summoner's Rift. There are also some bug fixes, so pause the video if you want to read through all of those. Now in order to see how this will change the meta, we have to look at what the meta did look like on patch 12.4b. As we can see, Innovators dominated the meta, followed closely behind by Reroll Talon and Bruiser Renata. Twitch Reroll, Irelia, and Ashe were good comps, while Mutants and Ahri struggled a little, but were still good enough to climb with. The surprising part about this patch is that very few of the best comps got hit hard, if at all, which means we will likely still see them perform well. I think overall we might be looking at a reroll meta next patch, as Ashe is getting buffed and Talon didn't get nerfed at all. This means that the two best comps will most likely be those. And when multiple 2-cost reroll comps are great, other 2-cost reroll comps usually start popping up, as it's much easier to 3-star your 2-cost units when others are playing other 2-cost units. This indirectly buffs Yordles even more, and we might even see Challenger Warwick return to the meta. With all of that said, let's move on to my tier list. At the top we see both Talon and Ashe reroll. Like I already mentioned, both of these comps were great on the last patch and they did not receive any nerfs. Innovators did not get hit hard enough to be put any lower than A tier, and Ahri should become a better carry with their buffs, and also with the other Syndicate buffs as well. 6 Yordles might be my spiciest take so far, but if there ends up being a lot of 2-cost reroll comps, you will hit Corki 3-star a lot faster, and since he's your main carry, that will let you stabilize and power spike so much faster. In addition, Corki, Lulu, and Gnar all got buffed across the board, and you will hit Veigar much quicker now due to the 2-cost reroll meta. Draven was absent from the meta last patch due to non-VIP Draven being unplayable, but with these changes you should stabilize a lot harder with a 1-star Draven, and remain powerful once he's VIP and 2-starred. Hextech Sivir will still be weak, but strong enough to be in B tier. If Shiv and the other Hextech units didn't get nerfed, I could see this climb to A tier, but maybe it's time to play Striker or 3 Socialite Sivir instead now. Irelia will still be good enough to remain in B tier, but with the AD nerf to her, it might be enough to put the nail in the coffin for that comp. Mutants go down to B tier with the Malzahar nerf. I guess the Kai'Sa buff can let you play this comp in a different way, but overall I see this comp being weaker than on the last patch. Renata Bruiser might be a comp you want to play if you have to pivot away from Ahri, but I don't see myself playing this comp in any other case unless I hit a lot of boosters in the early game and I have AP items on my bench. Warwick reroll will only be B tier if the 2-cost reroll meta ends up becoming true. If not, it will fall down to C tier. Thank you so much for watching. If you learned something, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Comment down below what video you want me to make next. And if you want to get better at TFT, join the Discord. We got over 7,000 other players there who are hungry to climb. And if you want to get coached by me, the information is over on the Discord server as well. So take care and see you in the next video.